Forget what Hollywood showed you about the Old West. Reality was very different and, frankly, hard to swallow. Historians found diaries from doctors of that time that reveal conditions nobody wanted to remember. Diseases that today seem like fiction were routine. Everyday habits that would make anyone feel sick. These 20 facts come straight from the archives, with no filter at all. Subscribe to our channel and leave some hype on the video to help us out. Number 1. In the Old West, taking a bath was almost a once-a-year event. It may sound crazy, but in the 1870s and 1880s, most people in towns across the American West bathed only once or twice a year. The reason was simple. Water was worth its weight in gold. Hauling barrels through dry territory was expensive, and a lot of people would rather spend money on whiskey than on hygiene. To cover up the smell, men and women would splash cheap perfume over the built-up dirt. The result? Skin infections were as common as dust on boots. Doctors back then reported sores that wouldn't heal for months. When someone finally got their hands on a real bathtub, the water was used by the whole family, one after another, until it turned black. Number 2. Did you know that in the Old West, men and women paid a lot for a perfume made from civet secretions? That's right. This cat-like animal produced a substance that, mixed with alcohol, became a luxury item. The problem is that nobody really bathed back then, so people would splash that perfume on their bodies to cover up the bad smell. It worked for a while, but it had a side effect nobody expected. The strong scent attracted flies and other insects like the person was a piece of meat. Imagine trying to impress someone in a saloon and walking out covered in mosquitoes. That was the price of vanity in a time when hygiene was rare and imported perfume was worth more than a good horse. Number 3. Did you know your barber could pull your teeth? In the Old West of the 1880s, that's how it worked. The guy who cut your hair also did tooth extractions using regular blacksmith pliers. No anesthesia, nothing sterile. The only thing between you and unbearable pain was a shot of cheap whiskey. And look, going to the barber for a toothache wasn't being dramatic. Oral infections were silent killers back then. A cavity you ignored turned into an abscess. The abscess turned into sepsis, and within weeks you were in the cemetery. Real dentists? They existed, but only in the big cities back east. If you lived on the prairies or in mining towns, your fate was the barber's chair, biting down on a piece of leather while the man yanked your tooth out with brute force. Number 4. In the Old West of the 1870s, going to the bathroom was a risky adventure. The outhouses were out back, shared by entire families and even neighbors. The hole went straight down into a deep, dark pit. Little kids sometimes fell in, and they weren't always rescued in time. The smell in the summer was unbearable. Worms would crawl up through the rotten wooden boards. There was no toilet paper, so people used pages from catalogs or dried corn cobs. At night, afraid of snakes and spiders, a lot of folks preferred using chamber pots inside the house. Those same chamber pots sat under the bed where the family slept. Number 5. In the Old West, drinking river water was like playing Russian roulette. Settlers didn't have a choice. They filled their canteens straight from the current without knowing what was upstream. And look, there was everything in it. Dead animals, trash from camps, and human waste from entire towns. The result? Cholera outbreaks that wiped out settlements in a matter of days. San Francisco lost almost 1,000 people in just one outbreak in 1850. The disease hit fast, A person healthy in the morning could be dead by night. The saddest part is that nobody understood the link between dirty water and disease. Doctors back then blamed bad air, while families kept drinking the same water that was killing them. Number 6. In the Old West of the 1860s, having lice wasn't embarrassing. It was basically the norm. Cowboys, miners, and soldiers lived packed into stuffy bunkhouses with no ventilation, sleeping on straw mattresses that turned into real breeding grounds. The itching was so constant that guys didn't even notice they were scratching anymore. The real problem? Those little bugs carried typhus, a disease that killed more people than a lot of the famous shootouts of the time. The fix was drastic: shaving your whole head. Traveling barbers made a fortune offering that service in the camps. Some guys even shaved off their eyebrows just to be sure. Funny thing is, a lot of them would rather risk the disease than lose their hair. Male vanity was around way earlier than we think. Number 7. In the Old West, washing clothes was almost a luxury. Cowboys would spend weeks wearing the same shirt, soaked in sweat, covered in dust, and sometimes stained with blood. Even washing once a month was considered a lot. The reason was simple. Water was scarce, soap was expensive, and time was money. A lot of people only changed clothes when the fabric literally started falling apart on their bodies. The more practical ranchers only had 2 sets of clothes, one on their back and another drying somewhere. The smell was so strong that people said you could spot a cowboy before you even saw him coming. That harsh reality shows how life on the frontier demanded sacrifices we can barely imagine today. Number 8. In the Old West, clean water was hard to come by. Cowboys would spend weeks on the trail without seeing a single drop good enough for hygiene. The solution they came up with will leave you stunned. They used their own urine to wash. That's right, you heard that correctly. The logic was simple. The ammonia in pee worked as a cleaning agent. Men would rub it on their hands and faces, believing they were disinfecting themselves. The practice came from the ancient Romans, who even used urine to whiten their teeth. However, what those cowboys didn't know is that concentrated ammonia caused serious skin irritation. Many of them developed sores and rashes without understanding why. The irony is brutal. Trying to get clean, they ended up creating even more health problems. Number 9. In the Old West, catching syphilis was basically a slow death sentence. Doctors back then had a solution that seemed to work: mercury. Patients would drink the silvery liquid or rub mercury-based ointments all over their bodies. The problem is, nobody knew they were trading one disease for another that was even worse. The mercury would build up in the body little by little. First came the shaking hands, then teeth started falling out. Over time, the person lost their grip on reality and slipped into full-blown madness. A lot of people died thinking they were getting better from syphilis, not realizing the treatment itself was killing them from the inside. Doctors kept prescribing it for decades. Number 10. Showing up at an Old West hotel didn't mean you were going to be comfortable. In fact, you'd probably end up sharing a bed with a total stranger. Rooms were few and demand was high, so owners would put 2 or 3 men in the same bed to squeeze out more profit. Lice, fleas, and bed bugs were guaranteed roommates, but the problem went beyond the itching. Diseases spread like wildfire. Syphilis and other venereal infections passed from person to person through sheets that rarely ever saw soap and water. A lot of travelers woke up with more than they came in with. That was the price of a night's rest on the American frontier. Number 11. Did you know that in the Old West, a man's beard could tell his whole story? Guys chewed tobacco all day, and they didn't always hit the spittoon. The result was soaked beards, stained brown, with that strong smell you could catch from a distance. Saloons had spittoons all over the place, but most cowboys had terrible aim. The floor got so nasty your boots would stick when you walked. And here's the worst part. Dentists back then reported that mouth infections were basically an epidemic. Tobacco mixed with a lack of hygiene turned those men's mouths into a total disaster. A nice-looking beard back then? Forget it. Number 12. In the Old West of the 1870s, most people thought they were cleaning themselves properly. They mixed campfire ash with old animal fat and called that soap. The problem was, nobody knew germs even existed. Pasteur had just proven that bacteria caused disease, but that information took decades to reach ranchers and cowboys. So, a guy would wash his hands before eating, thinking he was doing the right thing, and come down with typhoid fever the next week without understanding why. Doctors back then were still arguing about whether washing hands made any difference. Surgeons operated without gloves and wiped their instruments on their apron. Number 13. In the Old West of the 1860s, fresh milk was basically an impossible luxury. Without refrigeration, milk would sour in a matter of hours, especially in the brutal summer heat. But wasting food wasn't an option for anyone. Families drank the fermented milk anyway, and a lot of people even preferred it, believing it was good for the stomach. The problem is, it wasn't always safe fermentation. Dangerous bacteria multiplied in the liquid, and the result was predictable. Constant bouts of diarrhea that could last for weeks. In a time without antibiotics and with contaminated water in a lot of places, that killed more people than you'd think, especially children and the elderly. Number 14. This bone comb got passed down from father to son, from mother to daughter. It seems harmless, but it was a ticking time bomb. In the Old West, whole families shared the same comb to get rid of lice. The problem? Nobody cleaned it properly. Every head that used it picked up the bugs from the person before. Instead of fixing anything, the comb spread the infestation through the whole house. Neighbors lent them to each other. Travelers carried them in their bags. One single family could infect an entire town without even knowing it. Doctors back then didn't even understand how the pests spread so fast. The answer was right there, in everyone's pocket, being used every single day. Number 15. In the Old West, when a cowboy felt his gums throbbing, the fix was simple: a swig of cheap whiskey as mouthwash. The barbers back then, who also pulled teeth, swore alcohol killed any infection. It made sense in their minds, since they used whiskey even to clean bullet wounds. The problem is, nobody understood sugar back then. Frontier whiskey was full of molasses and impurities that fed bacteria. Result, the guy thought he was taking care of himself, but every rinse sped up the cavities. A lot of cowboys lost whole rows of teeth following that advice. The most ironic part? Clean water would have worked better, but it was hard to come by on dusty trails. Number 16. In the Old West, cowboys wore bandanas over their faces to protect themselves from the dust on long rides. The problem was, nobody washed those things. Guys used the same cloth for weeks, sometimes months. The fabric turned into a collection spot for mucus, sweat, and dirt. When dust stuck to the damp bandana, it formed a nasty crust right in front of their nose. Even so, taking it off meant swallowing dirt and having trouble breathing. It was choosing between two bad options. A lot of cowboys ended up with respiratory infections because of that mix of built-up grime and moisture. The most iconic accessory of the American West was also one of the most unhygienic things of the time. Number 17. In the Old West, taking a bath was a rare luxury. Most people went down to the rivers once a week at most. The problem was, those same rivers were used for everything: washing clothes, dumping trash, and even tossing in dead animals. Whole towns poured sewage straight into the water. The result was predictable. Dysentery outbreaks killed entire families. Doctors back then didn't even really know what caused the disease. A lot of them believed bad air was to blame. The truth only came decades later, when scientists discovered bacteria in contaminated water. Number 18. In the Old West of the 1880s, going to the bathroom was an adventure nobody wanted to repeat. Cowboys used whatever they could find along the way: leaves, dried corn cobs, smooth stones, or even pages from old catalogs. A lot of them just didn't use anything. The result? Infections, constant irritation, and discomfort that lasted for days. The latrines were kept far from the houses because of the smell, so in the freezing winter or under scorching sun, the suffering was guaranteed. Toilet paper had existed since 1857, but it was way too expensive for most people. Only the richest folks in the big cities had that luxury. For the average guy working out on the prairies, basic comfort was still decades away. Number 19. In the Old West of the 1870s, men had a serious problem: lice. The fix? Rubbing bear grease into their hair. Guys believed it killed the bugs and also gave their hair a nice shine, but it had a side effect nobody expected. The strong smell of animal fat attracted flies all day long. Imagine trying to work in the fields or play cards in a saloon with flies buzzing around your head non-stop. And in the summer heat, it got even worse because the grease would melt and run down your face. Even so, men kept using it because they didn't have many options back then. Number 20. In the Old West, cowboys slept with their boots on. It wasn't laziness, it was survival. A pair of boots cost 2 months' pay, and thieves prowled camps at night. The problem? Weeks without taking that leather off your feet created the perfect environment for fungus and bacteria. Military doctors back then documented cases of trench foot decades before the World Wars. The skin literally rotted. Some guys lost toes, others lost the whole foot. Gangrene showed no mercy. Movies show stylish cowboys drawing revolvers. They never show the stench of rotting flesh in a cattle camp. That part of history Hollywood preferred to keep buried.